We've got a few minutes here. Guys, don't, I mean. Are you guys ready? You got time? Hey, Dave. We're going to come to order. Okay, today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. It's about 2:45, and we're going to start today's study session. Could we get a roll call?
Councillor Coso.
Here.
Councillor Buell.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Woodruff.
Here.
Mayor Yazzie.
Here.
And Councillor Gonzalez has an excused absence.
Yes. Could we have a reading of the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement?
This is a call to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. As residents and visitors of Durango, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the history and cultural heritage of the land we inhabit. The city of Durango is situated on the ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu, Ute, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi Sinom, Hopi, and Dene Navajo nations. The original stewards of this land were forcibly removed and exposed to countless atrocities by the United States government, including repeatedly broken treaties, forced assimilation, the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, and the loss of ancestral homelands. We recognize lasting generational trauma exists within Native communities today. We affirm the continuing importance of ancestral sites to descendant communities as integral to the living cultural landscape. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed actions. May this serve as a step towards inclusion and reconciliation.
Okay, so Mayor, if you'd like, I could go ahead and just go
This-
down the agenda for you, because I know there's some that are no updates in that. If that would help, or if you want to, you can as well.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
What about the translation? Are we going to have any of that?
We don't do that on study session that I recall. So the next item we do have is a presentation by the Business Improvement District regarding recommendations to the changes of their ordinance 1997-0022. Tim Walsworth with BID would be doing a presentation on this. The BID board, which is a component unit of the city, has some requests for an ordinance change to their board composition. We thought it was a good idea to have them come present first at study session before you see it as an introduction to ordinance at the next council meeting, so that you have an ability to answer questions on that side. So with that, I will hand it off to Tim Walsworth.
Thank you. Good to see you, counselors and city staff. Thanks for giving me a few minutes. Tim Walsworth, Executive Director, Durango Business Improvement District. So the bid was formed back in 1997 by an ordinance of the city. This is how all bids get formed in Colorado. There's state statutes and then local municipalities fine tune those, so to speak. And like City Manager Madrigal just said, bid's going to ask for some, I think, fairly minor changes to one of the sections around requirements for board membership. Make sense? Okay, so again, that ordinance is from 1997, so it's what, 25 years old now, so it is getting a little outdated. And specifically in your meeting packet, I've included a couple things that we're requesting to be altered or updated in this ordinance. And so the first section is in section 5 of this ordinance from 1997. And it begins to describe the makeup of the bid board of directors. And it says they shall be electors of the district, which as defined in as defined in CRS 3125-1203 section 4. And what bid is proposing there is just to add on what does an elector mean? And it means 4 things, and I've included them here in the packet: that the elector makes his primary dwelling place in the district or owns taxable or real or personal property within the boundaries of the district, holds a lease in one of those properties, or is someone designated by the owner or the lessee. Does that make sense? So just fleshing those out, just to say what they are. The next section, as I just go a couple of slides forward, the ordinance also says, this is the part that was added locally, to assure that the board of directors is representative of the constituent electors of the district, the following additional requirements shall be imposed with respect to the composition of the board. And you see these things here: 3 of the 5 residents of the city. So it just puts some numbers, right, to what those electors are. 3 of the 5 residents of the city, 2 of the 5 hold a retail sales tax license, and 2 of the 5 own property. And so bid is requesting these changes right here. So on the one that says 2 of the 5 must be residents of the city, I will tell you that when you guys appoint the bid board members, bid encourages people who are qualified to apply. And this requirement, because of housing stuff, is hard for us. And it's eliminating good business owners who are connected to downtown, believe in it, want to be here, want to be a part of it. From applying, because we have this. I also understand the intent. We don't need people who live in Denver to be on the bid board, right? So we are proposing this change. Instead of 2 of the 5 be residents of the city, all board members must reside within 60 miles of the bid office. So that would extend to the communities that people live in, like myself. I live in Mancos, that commute over here and work and blood, sweat, and tears in Durango. Make sense? So that's the first change. The second requirement there, about 2 of the 5 holding retail sales tax licenses, we are not asking for any changes there. That makes sense to the bid to maintain as it is. But the last requirement, 2 of the 5 be owners of property within the bid. This one's also tough for us. We struggle, honestly, to find property owners who want to be on the bid board. And since there's already property owners are already included in the definition of an elector of the bid, we're asking that requirement be removed entirely. So the new requirements would be all board members live within 60 miles of the bid office, and 2 of the 5 hold retail sales tax licenses. So that's what we're asking for. Questions, comments?
Mayor, I've got a couple questions if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Why 60 miles? What was the idea behind 60?
Well, we started thinking, where do people live who commute into Durango every day for work? So we thought about Aztec, we thought about Farmington, we think about Mancos, Cortez, we think about even Pagosa, and that circle was about as far as it made sense for us. And so that's where we came up with that number. We played around with, should it be 30? Should it be 45? And as we thought about those communities that we know people live in and commute, we thought that 60-mile circle made the most sense.
Do you recall, Tim, had there been a lot of folks that have expressed interest in some of those bid board applications that have tried to apply and then were disqualified because they didn't live? Like,
Yep.
Can you give us a rough amount about how many?
Two people this year wanted to be on the bid board, but because of that particular requirement, 3 of the 5 living in the city limits, they wouldn't qualify. And they're good local business owners, people y'all know and work with.
Sure. And so you just want to have, so if I'm understanding correctly, you want to have somebody have a retail sales tax license and live within 60 miles, and that are the only 2 qualifiers to be on the bid board.
Yeah, extra qualifiers, right? You got to be an elector. There's those 4 things there. At least hit one of those, and then these additional 2.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so who can vote for officers now with if we change to these requirements?
Yeah, well, an elector of the bid remains the same. That's defined in state statute, if that's what you're asking. And so that I can't change state laws, nor do I want to. So that would remain the same. You know, it's fairly rare that bid comes up for an election, but we just did a couple of Novembers ago, and we asked the electors, would you vote to continue the bid? And it's mill levy that funds us for 15 more years. And they said yes, 79% yes, 21% no. So that definition would not change at all. It's merely the little add-on that the city and the founders of the bid back in '97 put on, and just things have changed 25 years later.
Alrighty. Kip, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. So Tim, 60 miles from the bid office, does it make sense to say just 60 miles from the bid region or anything along those lines so that in case the office gets moved?
Yeah, I know. Good question. I might have to defer a little to the city attorney to help me fine tune this.
Okay.
Our intention was, as I stated to Dave's question, just thinking of those communities. We don't have any intention of moving, but someday we probably will.
Right.
Right. And so that's a good point. But you need some reference point to draw your lines and circles from, would be my guess when it gets into the legal part of it.
A lot of people use El Rancho as their center point.
That will not be where the bid office is. After hours.
Center of the district,
Yeah.
because that could change over time too. You might expand or contract the district, but if you change your definition to 60 miles from the center of the district, that's what I.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And right now our office is just about dead center in the district.
One other question, turn of the century building, a couple other buildings that we've been seeing current turnover with. I realize that the owners have lived out of town for a long time. And so I guess there's a little bit of concern on my side that owners not living in the city is becoming a real problem, and they're not necessarily connected back to the community. The business owners, I understand, are connected to the community because of the business. So any comment there?
Yeah, well, and I think that's why these things were put in there originally. But in reality today, I feel like my job is to find people who meet the qualifications to be good board members that you guys interview and appoint to lead our organization. And it's limiting me as it's currently written. So it doesn't mean that a property owner who is here couldn't be on the bid board, because they would meet some of those definitions as long as we can check all the other couple of boxes. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just chime in too. I've been on, I think, 2 selection committees for bid board representatives, and a lot of them we've had to not accept good candidates because they needed to be one of those slots. And it was definitely rough because I know a lot of them are good members of our community and really care about our downtown. There is efforts to make that board more North Main inclusive now that you're really driving efforts that way. Is that true?
Yeah, well, we always, this is not anything formal. It's not in our bylaws, so it's an informal policy that the organization has, but we try to have one of our 5 board members, so 20%, from a North Main business. And the rationale behind that is we're funded by a property tax. So I can look up every property, I can see the values, and I can do the math. And 20% of the bid revenues come from North Main properties, 80% downtown. That makes sense with the concentration in larger buildings down here. And so we use that same math on how we comprise our board.
Well, and just with the development up there and the URA and everything, I think it's important that we
Yeah.
get good representation from all over. So
Yeah,
thank you.
currently it's Carly Thompson, who's
Yeah, Zia.
owner of 2 businesses up there, Zia.
See.
I don't know if Dave's ever heard of that one,
Yeah.
and Sage
Yeah.
as well. And we've had Erica Curley, her and her husband own Luisa's Electronics. So just some of the folks. One of the ones this year that we couldn't accept because she doesn't live in city limits is a North Main business owner.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Okay, next up, we have a presentation on the potential impacts and benefits of a City of Durango minimum wage increase by Mike French.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councilors. We were specifically asked to provide information on the impacts to our business community, so today's presentation will be limited to that request. One of the things that we did was collaborate with a couple of our strategic partners that included the Chamber of Commerce, Tim with BID, as well as Local First, and requested that we get a survey out to the business community. That survey closed on Friday afternoon. And so 10 minutes after it closed, I went ahead and emailed the council all the survey results as well as an executive overview. So what I'm going to do is briefly highlight a couple of things in that executive overview, and you can look at the report at your leisure, and then we'll go into a very short and brief testimony from a couple of other folks that include Heather Otter, who will cover our livable wage information and data from Region 9. We'll hear from Dr. Nate Peach of the Katz School of Business. We'll also hear from Jeff representing the Chamber of Commerce and Local First. And BID. We'll hear from Tim Walsworth. Who we heard from in the survey, we got 195 responses back in a very short period of time. So this was very top of mind for folks, and the high rate of response shows that. In terms of the sectors represented, a very good cross section of Durango's employers that's very representational of the existing employment base. Retail was 25%, restaurant food services was 18%, professional services 17%, hospitality and tourism 8%, and then there was a long tail that represented 9 other industries. In terms of the firm size, 35% employers had 1 to 5 employees. 40% had 6 to 20, meaning that 75% of the businesses surveyed were less than 20, which is actually right on the dot of what our Durango business profile looks like. Only 7% exceed 50 employees, and that's about right when we look at the rest of the employees. Where the wages are today, starting pay is for 89% was already higher than the Colorado minimum wage. That's question number 2. Question number 3, I'm just going to briefly highlight some things. Active recruitment, according to the surveyors, 60% of them currently have entry-level openings advertised above minimum wage. Expected business impacts, that's covered in 4 and 5. Question number 4, folks believe that it would create higher payroll expenses. That's kind of obvious, 59%, decreased profitability, and price is likely passed on to the consumer. 42% said that they would potentially cut staff and hours just based on the increased cost. Question number 5, pass-through capacity. 42% said that they could pass none of the costs on without losing business. And question number 6 is relocation and contraction risk. I'm not going to go over that. 7, sentiment will be covered by our speakers. And 8, these are just themes from the open-ended questions that you can see and click down into the survey. There was concerns that a mandate would erode pay differentials. In other words, folks that have already spent the time and energy to be above minimum wage see it as a competitive advantage. There was some concerns about seasonality, concerns about youth employment. In other words, there would be fewer entry-level jobs for the youth. And then a little bit of debate about, was our information clear enough with tip credit debate, right? So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Again, I'll briefly highlight the quick agenda. Heather Otter will speak first regarding the livable wage. Dr. Nate Peach will be second. He'll cover economic considerations. Jeff DuPont from the Chamber of Commerce talking about the sentiment from his business membership, and Tim Walsworth will finish with his sentiment from his membership as well, and then we'll answer any questions. Heather?
Hello, Mayor and councilors. Thanks for having me today. My name is Heather Otter. I'm with Region 9 Economic Development District, and we serve the 5 counties here. I call it Corner Pocket of Southwest Colorado, from Dolores County all the way to Archuleta up to San Juan County, where Silverton is, and here in La Plata, and then next door Montezuma. I am going to present some wage data for La Plata, the region, and also Durango specific as you weigh and consider this topic about raising minimum wage or not. So we'll talk about cost of living livable wage, and we'll also be addressing a newer, not newer, but some additional data that's called ALICE, which stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. And I know that many of you have seen some of that presentation from Lynn Urban with United Way. Region 9 has been studying livable wage in our area for a long time, I think since 1999, and we update the report about every 2 years. And we break it down by household configurations, so everything from a single adult to typically an adult with a child, and then a family of 4, which is comprised of 2 working adults and 2 children. And what we found in our most recent report that was updated in 2024 is that our neighbors in Archuleta County and the town of Pagosa Springs have the highest cost of living and need to make the highest hourly wage for a family of 4. And you can see there that it's at, $105,000 a year for a family of 4. La Plata comes in just under that at $104. There's always a little bit of friendly competition, maybe not so friendly among the counties about who's going to come in at the highest. But all joking aside, these are our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, and it is important. Moving on and looking more deeply at Durango specific, you'll see 3 columns there. So if we look at a single adult and then we move down to the bottom, the hourly wage for a working adult to be self-sufficient. So when I say livable wage, what I mean is self-sufficient, not relying on any type of subsidy. Okay, you can meet your basic needs. You are not rolling in the dough, but you are able to meet your basic needs, all of which are listed in that list. And the hourly wages, $22.74, according to our last update here. And this particular budget does account for, if you look there, some emergency savings. So a self-sufficiency budget does go beyond what I call a survival budget. But again, it is just meeting basic needs. I pulled some data from the quarterly census of employment and wages for Durango specific, the 3 zip codes. And I have highlighted a couple of the occupation groups, food prep and serving, personal care and service occupations. These are related to one of our larger industries in the area, which is tourism. Tourism is a basket of different occupations, as you know. But when I looked at the number of jobs based on 2024 data and average and median wages, I thought this would be interesting to share. Those are typically in the low wage category for occupations. But as you can see, the earnings are above the minimum wage, even for those. And then you can see some of these others. And the reason that I like to include average and median is that it helps you to see, you know, in median, we've got half of those people in those jobs making less than that amount, half of those making above that amount, and then you can see what the average is. I do want to make a note that the wages for a lot of these service jobs and the 2 that I highlighted there, this particular data does include tips. So the employers that report this data are required to report on the tips for these jobs. I think another important piece of this is just looking at the makeup of the jobs in your area. And so for Durango specific, I just included some of our largest industries. As you can see there in Durango, healthcare and social assistance, accommodation, food services, retail trade, those second 2 being part of that tourism industry, of course, as you can look at sort of number of jobs. And then that little tick in the middle is the national average. All right, if we just look at La Plata County jobs and wages, I have broken down here by low, medium, and high wage so that you can see the number of jobs broken down by these industries that make up our jobs in La Plata County. The blue didn't really match very well with that gray, but just know there's the orange in the bars is for a low wage. That blue or gray is the mid wage and high wage. So this will help you to see that while we do have a large number of jobs in some of the lower paid industries, we do still have good paying jobs in these different industries here in and across La Plata County. But this will give you an idea of if we took every industry here and we looked at annual wage, average annual wage, it's about 60,000. That would be across, that would be an average of all these industries. And it's just to show that a livable wage for a family of 4, again, for La Plata County is 104. And then finally, over to Alice, just interesting that these are important, I think, for us to take into consideration. These are households that are at a survival budget. So that is above poverty level. They are typically not eligible for subsidies, but they are not yet at a living wage. And so this will help you to see kind of the percentage or the breakdown, what that looks like across the state. And then here in Colorado, or I'm sorry, La Plata. So in La Plata, this data here that you see on the slide is for the state. In La Plata, the 2023 numbers is that 28% of the households were at the ALICE levels, and then poverty was 11%. So you've got about a 39, almost 40% that are at the ALICE level or below across La Plata County. That's just an additional slide showing that. Okay, and then I think this may be redundant, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I know there are some other towns that have looked at this and mandating it, kind of where they're at. So this is really just for reference. And then one of the things that I added here was simply to look at some of the ways that, when we look at the minimum wage and how that's determined based on the Consumer Price Index, there are several tasks, administrative and otherwise, that may or may not impact our businesses. So if we haven't looked into that, there are things that have to be figured out, not only from taxes, but also payroll. And if we do have things that are headquartered, like a Hilton chain and those hotels, but they are, headquartered somewhere else and they are here doing business, there can be some, again, I'll just call them administrative tasks that are also things to consider with the businesses that we may want to talk to them about when making these changes. So those are some of the things that need to be considered there. Any questions?
Yep, I have one question. Okay, with the Alice statistics, has it ever been lower than almost 40% like a few years back, or has this just started up this
Staying
way to
pretty
measure
steady.
stuff?
Yeah, staying pretty steady. So for the last couple years, La Plata and the state have tracked right around that.
All righty, thank you.
Could you go back a few slides back to the, let's see, La Plata County Jobs and Wages. Local government on the top, tribes, our largest employer, where are those jobs located in this spectrum?
In local government,
It's all local government, including the permanent fund and the growth fund would be located in here as well?
yes.
Okay. And then I guess the tipped rate piece, if we could forward or go back to that slide. There was a slide saying what the comparison cities were with tipped rate.
Oh,
So Denver, Boulder, Edgewater, when they're considering the tipped rate and the untipped rate, is there a standard deviation that they're using? Is there a standard number that they're saying they would add to the tipped rate to make it equal to the untipped rate? Does that make sense?
not across all three, and I don't have that data with me. I'd be happy to get back to you with that, but they all had a bit different calculations as they weighed how they were going to do it.
Okay. So the same consideration went into what they chose as a tip. Do they tend to go to an untipped rate and then subtract X to get to a tipped rate?
Not sure. Again, I'd be happy
Process.
to bring that back to you.
Yeah, so the tip credit as per state law is $3.02.
Always 302?
It's always 302,
Okay.
no matter what. So if you move your minimum wage to that untipped rate of 1881, then you cannot go lower than $3.02 below that for your tipped rate.
And all municipalities could go higher than 302, but they're using 302 almost by default?
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously because those workers are making more than $3.02 per hour.
Okay.
That's why that 302 threshold is there. If the employee does not make $3.02 per hour in tips, the employer is required to make up that differential to ensure that it's no less than the untipped minimum
Got it.
wage.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts on the minimum wage. I'll jump right into it. Hopefully this kind of complements the previous two presentations and discussions. I'll be providing kind of a 30,000-foot view, if you will. There's some studies that I'll cite at the end that might be useful interpreting some of the data that Heather presented, or maybe some of the data that Mike has presented. What I'm hoping to do is present what I'll call kind of the conventional wisdom among economists regarding the minimum wage. And so as we jump into it, I do think it's worth it to spend a moment to think about what the actual goals are. There's many things that the minimum wage might do. It might raise incomes, might generate economic activity. It might be a way to create a more equitable distribution of profits, improve quality of life. These are all possible, but when thinking about a policy and its goals, there's trade-offs. There might be other tools that can get us closer to a goal than the minimum wage. In terms of how firms respond, we've looked at some data already. A big question about the minimum wage is the question of magnitude. If it's going up, how much is it going up? And then speed of implementation. Is this something that has to happen in 6 months, 5 years? How much time do firms have to respond? And then in terms of how firms respond, by raising their labor costs, there's a few margins that we see both theoretically and then in some studies, again, that I'll cite. So one way they might respond by higher costs is by pushing those costs onto consumers. I'm going to raise the price of my product to compensate for the higher costs. We saw this post-pandemic with input costs. This is no different, very similar mechanism. Saw some indication of that in the survey discussed about earlier. So that's one way I might respond. I'm going to try to push this on to consumers. Another way I might respond as a company is substituting away from labor and towards capital, right? So that's going to look probably industry specific and firm specific. You could imagine a restaurant like Zia starting to look a little bit more like McDonald's. You go in, instead of 5 people working at the counter to create your food, there's now an iPad or 2. You punch in your order, a couple workers, as they've moved away from labor towards capital, because capital might be a little bit cheaper once we've raised the cost of entry-level workers. So that's one possibility, but again, probably firm and industry specific. Fine dining experiences downtown, I don't imagine would do that, but I don't know. Another interesting thing with the minimum wage is how they might respond to their employment mix, right? So with the employment mix, once that minimum wage goes up, this is really going to hit kind of entry-level workers just entering the labor force. I think of my son. My son will be looking for a job soon. He doesn't have business experience. He's never worked in a restaurant. He's never worked at a bike shop. And so by raising the cost of hiring someone like that, firms might reevaluate whether it's worth it to hire somebody without experience. Some interesting studies on this. There's a study of Seattle. Seattle raised their minimum wage recently, and what they found was, while it raised the wages of workers, existing workers that had proven kind of their worth to the firm, have some experience, their wages indeed went up. They did see a decrease in hours though, right? So firms can respond in different ways. So I have to pay you more. You might not work as much. It was a net increase though. So in terms of total income, for that group of workers, it went up, but they found decreased hiring among inexperienced workers. And that's important when we think about some of the industries we have in town, some of the workers that are employed there, for students, maybe people in high school that are looking for that kind of first job. This could be a challenge to them. And then the last metric, the last mechanism, it's very possible that firms are unwilling or unable to explore one of the first 3. Maybe I can't raise my prices because my consumers are going to leave. Maybe capital's not going to work. Maybe I need those inexperienced workers. That a portion of profits then comes out to pay for these higher wages. Again, whether that's sustainable probably depends on the industry, probably depends on the firm. I would say some other things to kind of add to this as we think about how firms might respond is thinking about other headwinds they face, right? So in our area, we're a rural area. If you're in light manufacturing, transportation costs, shipping costs are going to be expensive. We have very high real estate costs. We know that. We have tariffs on the horizon. If I'm in local retail, having to sell or trying to sell, let's say, clothes that are coming in from overseas that are now going to be more expensive could be problematic. So thinking about not just this in isolation, but other headwinds that companies might be facing in the near term. In terms of some of the studies that I'll highlight here in a moment, this first mechanism, so raising prices, this inflationary pressure, there's a really nice study on Flagstaff, their experience, and they found evidence of this, that it raised the cost of living in the area. They did find some good positive impacts. So what's really nice about this study is it really looks industry to industry. Some industries, workers tended to benefit, others not so much. And then I mentioned the Seattle study related to inexperienced workers. I would say when you're looking at research or kind of imagining how this might play out in Durango, as I look at the literature, there's very good studies on both sides. There's good studies that find positive impacts, good studies that find negative. So I interpret that as context really matters. And most of the research is devoted to large urban areas. And when we think about Durango relative to Denver or Seattle, one thing we do have in common is we're an economic hub. We're an economic hub for a region in the same way that Seattle or Denver might be. But in a few ways, we're very, very different. Obviously, we're rural. We don't have as thick of an economy, so supply chains within the local area are going to be much thinner. The issue of commuting could be very important. So it was mentioned earlier. You could imagine someone working in Durango, earning the minimum wage, and then driving home to Mancos and spending that money at a grocery store or whatever. So that would present kind of a leakage out of the economy. That would be a little bit different in Durango versus a large metro area potentially. And then in terms of the debate, if you want to get into the weeds, there's a lot of issues related to methodology. When was the study conducted? Is this during a recession? Is this during an expansion? As you might imagine, it's kind of hard to pull out the specific impacts of the minimum wage within a large economy over time. But some studies that I would direct you to if you're interested. This first study, Myth or Measurement, this is a large survey of the literature as of 2022, looking across the country in different areas. And they do find pretty robust negative impacts on employment in specific industries. And again, these are mostly among teens, young adults, and less educated workers that are vying for those entry-level positions. The Seattle study I mentioned, for workers that had a strong background, strong resume, this did raise their wages, but it did result in less hiring for entry-level positions. The study by Stifler is looking at some trends in Denver. These are very positive impacts. I will say it's maybe not as rigorous as some of the other studies. It's looking at some trends without maybe advanced statistical controls and stuff, but it's still relevant. And then I think my favorite, to be honest, is the one on Flagstaff and Coconino County. It's very, very thorough. They have very, very good data, and they're able to map where the positive effects are happening, which industries, but then also where the negative ones, are happening. And then the last citation is it's a critique of a recent study in Boulder County, and it just kind of highlights the role of assumptions and nuances. So if that's of interest, I provide that. Any questions?
Thank you, Professor. One question. Have we seen any municipalities that have just started to raise their minimum wage according to inflation? They haven't actually had a jump to any X factor, but they've been trying to push employers to move the minimum wage up in a relatively small way. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. The ones that I'm familiar with off the top of my head, it's usually a two-pronged approach. We're going to do both. We're going to raise it, and then we're going to index it across time. I don't know of one off the top of my head where it was just an index. Because the issue is that there's been such a lag. I mean, when you look at the federal minimum wage, it's pathetic. I was paid that in high school, and that was 3 years ago.
Right.
So it's usually a two-pronged approach, but there could be one that I'm not thinking of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. I limited myself to one slide, but not that many bullet points, right? Twice as many bullet points, but one slide. So as you've heard from the professor, I'm going to reiterate some of the same things. I think it's just not a good time to be considering this when we think about things that are going on in our economy the last 5 years. We have labor shortages. We have inflationary increases, unpredictable markets. All these things are facing our businesses right now. And for us to mandate a higher wage for the city of Durango, I think is just something that's going to be difficult for some of these businesses to overcome. I think what it requires to be a business owner in Durango, which some of you probably know well, is it requires flexibility. So it depends on what your industry is, what you're doing in Durango, and there's training programs, there's different things that require flexibility to start at a certain level, work your way in, train those people to get them to a more livable wage, not just a minimum wage, but livable wage. It's a difficult time to be a business owner, and we really just need flexibility. So talking about small business sustainability, small businesses operate on tight margins, right? They can't easily absorb overhead increases. So our businesses, a lot of people think business owners are wealthy individuals, not the ones I meet. As a business owner myself, the margins are slim. And so changing these things not only creates problems with the entry level pay wages, but it also creates compression issues, which you've heard a little bit about. Moving on to sales tax revenue risk, that's something that Dr. Nate, I forget Dr. Nate's last name, Peach, talked about with sales tax revenue. You know, for the city of Durango, we already face some leakage to Farmington. Farmington pays $12 an hour for their minimum wage. So when we increase ours to $15 to $17 an hour, that'll increase the price of goods here too, potentially driving more sales tax revenue to Farmington and some of the surrounding areas. I think we should let the market drive the wages. It's happening already. Good businesses are paying more. They may come in and start at a lower wage, but they train their people, they pay them more. As was shared earlier, 90% of our jobs are above minimum wage. We need to maintain that 10% for entry-level jobs. So whether those are students, high school students, college students that require more flexibility from owners, we need that flexibility to start at a certain level. We have jobs in our community that are recreation people that are taking people down the Animas River, right? And to start a training program, you start with high school students without much expertise, and you train them. To start them at a higher wage is just harder for that company to function. There's potential too for nonprofit impact. Obviously, they don't have the lever to increase revenues. They have to figure out how to cut services to account for that kind of a wage increase. Fort Lewis College is something people probably don't think a lot about, but they have 500 student employees up there at Fort Lewis College. Most of them make between $14.50 and $16 an hour. Raising minimum wage to $17 for Fort Lewis College would be a pretty steep budget impact. And I think we should use Denver as a cautionary tale. You know, Denver has had an aggressive minimum wage increase since 2020. They've had 425 restaurant closures between 2022 and 2024. That's over 80% of our state's restaurant closures happened in Denver. So lastly, I'll just say, listen to our business owners. You have the results of the survey. If you decide to take this to vote, I would ask that you bring business owners in and talk to them. I've got a couple of testimonials I'll share from them, 3 leaders in our community. So Tori Osla, general manager for the Strader. We all know the Strader. In her letter to City Council, she identified a minimum wage increase would result in either reducing staff, cutting services, or increasing prices, each of which undermines the guest experience and ability to compete. Alex Michael, owner of Mild to Wild Rafting, he said being required to pay seasonal teenage employees who are just learning basic job skills, the higher wage is unsustainable. This change would not only eliminate entry-level positions, but also pressure wages across the board. And then lastly, Chris Euler, CEO of Peak Food and Beverage, our largest restaurant owner. An increase in minimum wage would prompt our company to look outside the city limits for future growth opportunities. Our workforce starts between $14.80 and $18 per hour, and they have a clear path to pay increases once they're trained. Our average hourly employee makes $27 an hour. In 2023, we made a commitment to pay higher wages, and since then, we've reduced our employees from 350 to 250 this year. So higher wages also means less jobs. In closing, I appreciate the time to come talk to you all. I think this is a really difficult decision to make, and I just hope that more business leaders will be part of the conversation if you decide to go to vote. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry, is that okay?
Go ahead.
Are you the last presenter of this topic,
No,
or is
there's
Mike gonna
Tim.
come up? There's one
Tim.
more? Okay, then I'm gonna wait till the end. I'm good.
Should I stay close?
No, I just stay good. I wanted to make sure. But thank you.
Hey, Jeff, I'll just ask you from your perspective. I appreciate the cohesive voice that the chamber provides for the businesses in the area. I really appreciate Strader did a nice little analysis that they sent off to us, and I really appreciate the time and energy that Tori put into that. I guess I'm not hearing enough about what businesses may consider the need for to raise those employee wages eventually, because they're fighting many of the same cost increases that everybody else is fighting, even as a business owner. So if there's not a minimum wage increase, and I'm not a huge fan of minimum wage increase, it's a hammer where we need more scalpels, but there's a piece of questions, I guess, around how do the business owners help the employee cost of living go down? How are they going to enable minimum wage employees or very low paid employees to survive in a town that's getting more and more expensive? Any comments on that?
That'll take some time to consider, but I think, you know, just anecdotally thinking about 10% of our employees being paid at the minimum wage, I think there's an assumption to be made there that that 10% is probably not in the livable wage world. That may be wrong, but I would say a high percentage of them are high school students or students that have other priorities at the time. So I think that's a complex question, but I think there's a lot of things to it, including that the 10% that are getting paid the minimum wage now are probably not the ones that are buying houses or looking to buy houses.
Okay.
That could be wrong.
Okay. Thanks.
I think just real quick too, to your point, there's a lot of things to consider too that businesses try to do outside of wages, you know, for benefits, employee benefits, whether it's free food or you know, access to certain services that they might do, and those don't show up in those surveys. And so that's something else to think about.
I would think the most minimum wage employees are not going to be eligible for healthcare benefits, you know.
Right.
The
No, you're right.
benefits that
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
working are
I
probably
agree.
getting mid-tier or higher tier employees, correct?
Yeah, I would say they're hourly
Dave,
employees. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Me again. I don't have too much to add. Those, well, good thoughts there. Kip, maybe to that question, one thing that struck me when you asked it was I think about who supports nonprofits in our town that are helping people with these daily challenges. And a lot of it is these businesses we're talking about right here. They're probably the core supporters of a lot of these services. I don't know if that gets exactly to your question, but it's something that certainly flashed through my mind. And my comments to you guys, I think a data-driven approach is what's really, really needed here. That Flagstaff study that Dr. Peach talked about, that seems very interesting to me. Like Jeff said, I would encourage you guys as these discussions continue to talk directly to business owners. Y'all do great at office hours. Walk and roll coming up, hang out with Dave, right? Invite some business owners to come if you can do that and have that nuanced conversation about it in a one-on-one setting. I think that might be really, really valuable for you guys. I wondered too, like Jeff said, you know, who are the people making the minimum wage right now? We see those averages from Region 9 and they're all above it. I know that's the average and the median. I tend to think like Jeff is that those are very entry-level employees, probably typically younger. I'm not sure exactly how that factors into your decision making, but certainly it's going to be part of it. And as we've seen in the data too from Region 9, a lot of businesses are already paying well above that minimum wage, right? And I'll leave you with this. So BID, I employ about 10 part-time seasonal employees in the summer. They're called ambassadors. They walk around downtown and they help people pay their parking meter or figure out where to go eat or where to buy the t-shirt, right? So I'm not selling anything with those jobs. I don't make any money from them. That's not how we operate, right? So I can't raise my price. So what do we pay them? We start them at $17 an hour. We did that on purpose to make that a bit of an attractive job for people who want to have that kind of work. And if this were to go in, what would I do? Well, my budget's pretty flat every year. It does not change by leaps and bounds. I present my budget right here to you guys every year. So that's public information. Y'all can see it. And so that budget is, it's almost the same every year. And so if that were to hit us, we would probably want to increase wages to maintain that competitive advantage. And guess what? I cut hours and I cut jobs. So that's an anecdotal story. The BID is not a business like we're thinking about here in these discussions, but just to put a little perspective to you guys. Okay, thank you.
We don't have finance. We're up to community development monthly report.
Yeah, do we want to just real quick? Yeah, just because I know there were some people concerned about like next steps of this, who are sitting here because there's no public comment and stuff. So I don't know if I can or you want to say like how this will work going forward. And okay, so just so everyone's clear, because I know Karen spent a lot of time sending us items and coming to council meetings, is council asked for direction on this, some background information. We now have it. If we want to put it on the agenda and to have like more substantial discussion with community input and that sort of thing, it will come with it when a councilor brings it up under new business at a city council meeting, and then it'll get put on a future agenda for like public discussion and such. So I just wanted to be transparent and clear so we knew, because you guys are all here, which I love, and great and involved in the discussion. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you, Mike. That was amazing, everyone, for contributing and really giving us some background and some knowledge. I think it gave us a lot to think about. I think what you just said, Tim, about your employment is really, it speaks volumes, because even though that's not necessarily all the businesses here, every one of us is different. And the solution and the success of just my two businesses that I own are so drastically different that I think, like as Councilor Coso said, like a scalpel is needed here and not necessarily like just a big decision, because a minimum wage increase would severely hurt one of my businesses, and then the other one would be fine. And so I think really finding that and really listening to our businesses, we want them to be successful, but we do have an affordability problem, as Region 9 also told us, in Durango, and it needs to be addressed. It's serious, but that is also with housing, transportation, there's a lot of answers to that as well. So anyways, I just wanted to let you guys know next steps, so we were all clear on the future of this topic. So thank you.
Actually, Mayor, can I ask if is another option? We had a very business focused study session here. Is another option to ask for a report that is tilted more towards the workforce in a future study session?
Under new business, if we brought that up,
Okay.
you got council support.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. My apologies, a newbie question, so thank you.
Dave? Okay.
Okay. Next up, we have our community development monthly report with Jamie Lopko.
No worries.
Community development strives toward the mission, vision, values through our day-to-day work, engaging with the public, guiding them through development with the city of Durango. So as part of this, we have our community development commitments to customer service, providing professional and efficient assistance, accessible environment, clear, comprehensive, and consistent communication, and working towards context-sensitive solutions. So in doing that, I wanted to share some of our staff in action with this. We have the photo on the left is our staff out on a site, meeting with the applicants, going through the comments, making sure we're hashing through the design, working towards a context-sensitive solution. And on the right, we have staff working with a customer at a computer station that we have in the lobby at the Community Development Engineering Building. This provides an accessible environment for people who don't have a computer, for they can open OpenGov accounts, submit permits, look up maps, zoning information, or search for records. And so I mentioned OpenGov. That's a new permitting software we started using in July of 2024. So that's going to allow us to better track our data for permits submitted for review and that are issued. It's also going to allow me to provide better comparative data for you in the future when we do like year over year trends. So the next several slides, I'm going to share with you some of our first quarter data for permits for community development. So first is our land use permits. This is going to be things like annexations, conditional or special use permits, change in use, offense or assign permits, historic preservation. We have our alteration certificates there. We have plan developments, our site plan review, or subdivisions. So it's a very big list of things that will come in as a land use permit. So the blue bar is going to represent permits that have been submitted for our review. The orange bar is going to be the permits that have actually been issued or approved that's going to allow them to move forward to either apply for a building permit or a business license or whatever the next step is. So this is going to only represent our first quarter. So we do still have 108 permits that are active, and that is going to include some permits that carry over from 2024 because those are larger and more complex permits that we're still under review. So next we'll look at code compliance. Those are cases related to potential violations from our land use code or from our building codes. We do also have code compliance on our police department, and those are going to be a little bit different. So ours are planning, zoning, building issues, whereas the police are going to be safety related items, parking, noise, other things like that. But we do absolutely work collaboratively together to make sure that every case is evaluated. We also have two options for citizens to report issues for code violations. We have our OpenGov software, and then we also have the SeeClick Fix. So OpenGov is only used for land use and building codes. That's the only things that are going to come to us. SeeClick Fix, they can report anything as a concern to the city, and those will be funneled to the appropriate department. The most violations that we see in community development are signs, fences, lighting, sheds, things of that nature. So the charts on the slide shows the blue bar is going to represent the number of cases that have been opened, and the orange bar represents the number of cases that are closed. So when a case is open, someone's going to report a concern. We're going to initiate the report. We'll send out code compliance to evaluate it. If a violation is found, the staff's going to work with that owner to get voluntary compliance. We're going to educate them on the code and try to work towards compliance on that. If we run into issues with getting compliance, then we will actually start the violation process and issue a formal letter and work through the process to get client compliance on that. And right now we have 26 open cases. And again, that will include some that have carried over from 2024. That is only, the data on the screen is only from our OpenGov software. I just recently got access to our SeeClick Fix to be able to do reporting of that. So in the future, I'll include those as well. But I was able to get a snapshot that from SeeClick Fix from January through March, we've had 14 things reported through that. And lastly is our building permits. Again, this is quarterly information. And so this is going to be our roofing, mechanical, solar, or general permits. As of right now, our electrical, plumbing, and gas permits are reviewed and inspected by the state. So our building permits in blue are going to be things that are issued, or things that are applied for, and the orange is where they have actually been issued for construction. So you can see our numbers are starting to rise, and of course, we're going to continue that trend as things start to warm up. We'll get more and more permits. And also, I wanted to let you know we have recently filled our building official position. So Ron Haney comes to us with a lot of knowledge and experience and certifications that has allowed us to bring plan review back in-house instead of having a consultant doing that. It's also allowed us to increase our inspection times. Instead of asking people to request an inspection for 48 hours in advance, we've reduced that to 24 hours for inspections. And so with that, we'll definitely see an increase in permits due to the expertise and catching things that may not have been caught in the past. So we have a map. This is shows you our active permits. We have 117 active permits in the city right now. These are the ones that are under construction. And so as you can see, they're kind of all over the city, but we do have a good concentration of them in the Three Springs area. Additionally, we also have 55 permits that are still under review by our staff that are not in this. I wanted to give you a couple examples of some projects that we have going on right now. This is Mesa Verde Estates out in Three Springs. It's a senior living facility that's going to have 124 units. 92 of those will be assisted living units and 32 will be memory care. They're well underway and they anticipate completion of construction in August. However, once they're completed, they do have to start the licensing process, which may take a couple of months. So they anticipate opening by the end of the year. They also did share that they are currently taking reservations for the facility, and they actually already have 34 applications for those units. The other project is Residences of Durango, two-phase affordable housing project. The units are income restricted to 60% or below of our area median income. Phase 1 is a retrofit of the Best Western Motel into 72 studio and one-bedroom units. These are expected to be completed in the coming weeks, and they are taking applications for occupancy of those units. Phase 2 is 2 new buildings that are being constructed behind the hotel building, and those will be 48 units that will be 2- and 3-bedroom units, and they're due to be completed around August. And lastly, just wanted to share with you a photo we have of our city staff from Community Development and Transportation. Attended a National American Planning Association conference in Denver in late March. It was a great opportunity for us to network and build relationships, learn some emerging trends in planning and transportation, and gain some knowledge to bring back to the city to provide opportunities to enhance our programs and processes here. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Obviously, yes. Hey, can we go back to the slide on land use permits?
Okay.
Sorry, code compliance cases.
Oh, okay.
My fault. Why so high in January?
That is because in December, we hired a code compliance officer, and he was being more proactive and going out and seeking out cases. You can see that we dropped off in February because he was promoted to our chief building inspector. So we now have a vacancy in that position. So what you're seeing is the difference between having a code compliance officer proactively going out looking for things versus in February and March where it's more complaint driven because we don't have the staff to respond at this point.
And that staff person is expected to be hired?
It is currently out right now, and we expect to do interviews on probably by the end of May.
What do you have a timeline that it typically takes you to rehire a position? Is that so varied it doesn't?
The applicants that we're getting, we're not getting as many applicants as we would like to see with this application. So we're looking for other opportunities to put it into like the ICC or the local code enforcement boards instead of just looking at government jobs and LinkedIn and Indeed,
Okay.
things like that. So we're trying to get more applicants for this position.
And it seems like if I got an open code compliance case and I close it within the same month, that doesn't make sense to me. Why would I not be opening cases and they take longer than a month to close? Does that make sense?
It may be the end of the month.
Okay.
Like, we may get something at the end of February that doesn't close until March. And there are cases that are longer level because if we don't get voluntary compliance, we do have to go through the court process.
Okay. But the closure of a case would happen whenever it closes 2-3 months later, if that's the case.
Yeah, it may be a couple of days. It may take a couple of
But on
months,
this
depending on
one,
how long it
okay.
takes to get compliance.
Okay. Thank you. C-Click it, Fix It. Is there a region of the city that tends to do more of those than other regions of the city? Is it more focused downtown? Do you know?
And that one I do not know.
And how many building permits on the building permit slide, how many are showing rejected? So you've got submitted and issued. Again, some carryover to future months, I would imagine. It's not just a 1-month process, but how do we know how many got rejected?
We historically don't reject building permits. Usually it's a back and forth. We will provide comments to the applicants and however long it takes them to review things. It takes a substantial amount of time before what would happen is if somebody doesn't respond in 6 months, we would ping them and say, hey, give them a deadline. If you don't respond, we will then consider the application stale and it will then be voided.
Okay, great. Mesa Verde
Yes.
project, is that in conjunction with the tribe?
No.
In any way? No? They don't have there's no tribal elder preference or anything at that facility?
That I'm aware of.
Okay. And then residences, we've heard that it's going to open in a couple of weeks for the last couple of weeks. So can anybody narrow it down a little bit more and get a date?
They ran into some water issues, so they're working through that. But at this point, last I talked to them, that they were uncertain until they got the water issue resolved.
Okay. And then when it is complete, what is the next steps for people to actually inhabit the facility?
They have actually already fenced off the front building, which will be the first phase to occupy in anticipation of allowing people to occupy that building. So as soon as they get the certificate of occupancy for that building, they already have applications in place for people to be able to occupy those units.
And there's a management company that takes over at that point?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Next up, we have our Prosperity Office Monthly Report, Mike French and his team.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tommy Crosby, Economic Opportunity Manager with the Prosperity Office. I'm here to give an update on our grant approval workflow. One thing I always love highlighting is these grant programs are one of my favorite tools that the city has to bring the city's vision to life in a really creative, palpable way that people can see in a less traditional municipal way. Murals, events, creative placemaking, great marketing initiatives. that ties really well into the Prosperity Office's mission. That really, I'd like to highlight this idea that we celebrate our unique culture to attract visitors and enrich the lives of those who call our city home. I love that the city's able to have these grant programs as a tool and an offering to do just that. One thing I like to share about our grant programs is when I started with the city in 2021, the city granted about $60,000 roughly in annual grant projects throughout the course of the year. At the end of 2024, with Visit Durango coming into the city, if we're including their grant programs, we tipped the scales at over $1 million of projects, programs, events, experiences, marketing campaigns, going directly back into our community, serving those who live here, and attracting new visitors. So what I'm here this afternoon to chat about is how we are moving forward with approving the workflow around these grants. Some of the counselors who were here at the end of our first grant cycle of 2025, this might be redundant, but to some of our new counselors, we've updated the grant approval workflow from 2024 to 2025. City Council is the final authority on making the final approvals for all of these grant programs. We have cohorts of subject matter experts who review each of our grants. They really get into the weeds. They have very spirited conversations. They follow up with applicants as necessary, and they present what you have in your packet today, being an executive report of recommended projects to be put forward for funding. In the past, this used to be done by boards and commissions. With some of the changes to this board and commission structure, we tried to standardize best practices of having all projects flow to council for final approval. So there's really 5 main grant programs that you'll see through the course of the year. On tonight's council agenda, you'll see the Lodgers Tax Local Event Marketing Grant Program, and you'll see the Durango Creates Grant Program. Later in the year, you'll see our Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture, our Renew Grant, and our Sustainability, or what was formerly known as our Destination Advancement and Green Durango Grant Program. So those are the 5 main grant programs that you'll get used to seeing on your consent agenda at council meetings throughout the course of the year. And like I mentioned, we thoroughly vet each of these projects. The majority of them will make it to that group of subject matter experts, but staff does a first pass just to make sure that those grant applicants meet basic eligibility criteria. You know, if you're applying for an arts and culture grant, we're probably not going to write you a reimbursement check for a new hood system for your restaurant. You know, we make sure that we're putting projects into the correct lanes before they make it to that committee review. And then on to council, we have a pretty thorough list of evaluation criteria that each grant receives an individual review and a score from those subject matter experts, and then they convene as a cohort, and they use that scoring process as one of the many tools to make that final decision. We've gotten some questions lately of, I got a higher score than so-and-so project, but I got less funding than them. We really try to reiterate that the scoring is one of the many tools that our subject matter experts use in making their final decisions. And then in each council meeting where you're being presented with a grant for approval will include a pretty uniform executive summary in your council packet. You'll have a list of grant applicants that received funding, a brief description of their project, and then the dollar amount that they will be receiving. A little bit in the weeds, the way that the city's grant program works is we don't provide funding up front. So after a project is finished, they'll receive a reimbursement for that dollar amount listed in the total award column in that executive summary. But just wanted to make sure that we allowed the opportunity for you to get familiar with this new grant approval workflow. And if you did have any questions on our grant program, I'd be happy to entertain those at this time.
Please, yeah. Thanks, Tommy. First off, I guess I wanted to make a comment that in talking to the artists and a couple of gatherings that I've been able to get at, they're very big fans of what you're doing and really appreciate the coordination and the organization that you provided on it. So thanks so much for that. I've got a couple of questions to hit here so that we don't bog down the council meeting. Maintenance of existing artwork. The Moments Project was one that I was a huge fan of, and has sat unmaintenanced for 20 years, whatever it has been. So I just wanted to get an idea from you on how maintenance of current art projects is incorporated into what we're doing in regards to the funding.
Great question. And Catherine Wagner with the Durango Creative District is here to provide a quarterly update for the Durango Creative District. I think she might be touching on the Moments Project specifically of historic signage, so good timing on that.
You will be now.
And then we have an annual budget line item of about $25,000 to $30,000 specifically for public art maintenance. We issue an RFP for that each year. We have a professional come and provide on-site servicing of the city's public art collection, and then they'll provide us a list of, hey, this goes above and beyond my normal scope of work. I'm not going to reprint 15 of the 20 Moments Project's placards and update the historical facts on them. I'm going to leave that to you, but give you a really thorough recommendation. So that's a really great resource that we have to maintain our growing set of city public art assets.
All right. I look forward to hearing from Catherine as well. Uncharted Lines received both a $1,000 grant and a $5,000 grant. I think it was the only one that received two separate grants.
Great question. So for our Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture funding and the Durango Creates grant program, these are both arts and culture specific grants. In that grant application, it strictly says that applicants cannot receive funding for marketed relating expenses. In the ballot language that approved the original 2021 Lodgers Tax collections increase, under the arts and culture section, it says that applicants could be considered for event marketing under Lodgers Tax. So we kind of make that internal referral of if an applicant is applying to Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture for the first time, their first pass budget might have $1,000 for marketing. Staff will reach out and say, hey, just so you know, this $1,000 is not eligible. We'd recommend that you apply for the Lodgers Tax local event marketing. Somewhat redundant, but we're trying to do the best we can with what we've got. And so that's why you might see the, lack of a better way to put it, the double dip. It's intentional and it traces back to the original Lodgers Tax ballot language.
Okay, so it doesn't happen very often, it sounds like.
Not
just depending.
Not often. I don't want to throw out, it's a quarter of applicants, but there are a few, especially if you look at the list of our Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture grant applications that received funding. I Am Music, they received a Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture grant. They also receive a Lodgers Tax local event marketing grant. So it occurs more of the exception than the norm, I would say.
Okay.
And it tends to be for events and festivals a lot of the time is what really can leverage that event marketing funding to make sure that the event that they received arts and culture funding for, they can market it, get people to attend, et cetera.
Okay, great. I had a question on public art master plan. Is that a Catherine question or is that a you question?
Yep,
Catherine
that's one of the main parts of the Durango Creative District's City of Durango work plan. So they have a robust contract with the City of Durango. Public art master plan is in there. Had a great board meeting last week where that was one of Catherine's main priorities, that she's getting her DCD board ready, set, and going about.
Okay. Last question, why reimbursed instead of upfront costs? I would imagine many artists would prefer to get the money ahead of time, but is that a concern that it would get spent?
Great question. That's that's one of the biggest questions we get from applicants. We are ensuring that we stay in line with all city purchasing and finance budgetary requirements. We've set the grants up in a way where issuing a single reimbursement after the project can prove that the project has been completed is kind of the smoothest, most audit-proof way of doing it. To address that, we've partnered with Region 9 Economic Development District of Southwest Colorado to create a loan program where the grant recipient can take their letter of award that the city issues and bring that to Region 9 and more or less use that as collateral to take out a loan so they can receive that lump sum up front. And those are fixed rate, quite low, and have a great local nonprofit lender that we can refer folks directly to bridge that gap. But yes, that's a common concerning question that we get from applicants.
Well, that's a great solution. I mean, I love the partnership with the regional nonprofit as well. So I'll set you free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. But I'd like to say, I like how you streamlined this so everything's equitable. So thank you.
Are you still doing the business assistance, like helping local artists with QuickBooks and understand? Are you still, because that, when you brought that up, when I was on the CEC, that was amazing.
Yes, we reworked it in 2025. We put out an RFP for the our creative consulting program, and it's been fun. Local news network actually won that RFP, received that contract. I've been poking my head into their sessions. In years past, we've maybe had 2 or 3 folks from each round 1 and round 2 of the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture program participate. I don't know if you've been in our Pinion conference room. It's about a 15-person capacity at our Comm Dev and Engineering building, and every seat at the table was full at the session they had 2 weeks ago, which is fantastic to see. They've customized it a little bit to kind of meet people where they're at rather than this one-size-fits-all approach, and we've gotten some really great feedback. And as far as ensuring that we're being responsible financial stewards of city assets when we're investing into local nonprofits, community organizations, private businesses, ensuring that those businesses have the tools and resources they need to stretch that funding as far as they possibly can. We were able to bridge that gap with this creative consulting business program, which has worked out really well.
It's phenomenal. When I was sat on the Creative Economy Commission, there was a ton of artists that had never had this kind of funding before, and they were applying for, and they were, and Tommy saw that need and that gap, and, just whether it's QuickBooks or financial advising or whatever, it's just general business. And I think it was so creative and so forward thinking. And I'm so glad it's still going. So
yeah, me too. Thank you. Thanks, counselors.
Okay. Next up, we have the Durango Creative District Quarterly Update.
I think that was the most elegant segue that I've ever seen in terms of presentations. So for counselors who are new, the Creative District Program is under the Office of Colorado Creative Industries, which is from the Office of Economic Development at the state level. We actually just attended the annual conference last week. It was in Grand Junction. It was incredibly inspiring. The first day is all of the creative districts from the state get together for convening. We talk about what we're doing, what our funding programs are, what regional collaborations there might be. And I will certainly hit a lot of the notes that you brought up, but I wanted to share a really fun anecdote. I was actually attending a mayoral panel with mayors from Breckenridge, Grand Junction, and Ridgeway, and it was being moderated by Josh Blanchard, who's the head of CCI, and a question came from the audience about using Lodgers tax funding for arts and culture. And a lot of the mayors who were talking about how amazing their programs are in the city, they're like, oh, we haven't done that yet. And Josh was like, Catherine from Durango. So he pulled me up to join the panel. And Durango really is looked at statewide as the gold star in terms of how we're utilizing this funding, not only because of all the amazing programs, but also how we've been able to collaborate with the city in implementing a lot of the boots on the ground training. I have been keeping a really solid timesheet, and for the first round I had 95 hours directly of one-on-one consultations with applicants. From start to finish, we're trying to empower these creatives to learn how to write really good grant applications, so they're not only relying on these funds, but also other business opportunities and other grants. And we also do a lot of networking consulting. Because I get to have these initial conversations, brainstorming ideas, I get to have a really unique direct sort of sightline into where are gaps in the community and opportunities, into the types of folks who are not applying, the types of folks who are applying again and again and again, but aren't quite refined enough in terms of their applicants. So we're able to step in and help with additional coaching. It's really exciting to be able to identify opportunities to help these folks. I will talk a little bit more about the CCI conference in a little bit, but on that note, I was requested by not only Josh Blanchard, but the other mayors and attendees to provide some more data about our implementation of the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Fund. We are also finalizing in the process with Nate Peach, who just presented earlier, and Deborah Walker and the Catt School of Business, an economic impact report on the first 3 years of Lodgers Tax, which will look at how this funding is circulated locally, numbers of jobs created, part-time jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So that is slated to be completed late summer. So that information is forthcoming. Let's see. On the note of Lodgers Tax, I just touched on it a little bit, but a really huge project that we've been working on the Creative District is creating an archive of all of the projects that have been funded. So just yesterday, we officially launched it on our website. We have 107 pages, individual pages. Here, as you can see on the slideshow, this is just a quick screenshot of, we've got it broken down into years, 2022, 23, 24. And then once you click on it, it will go into more detail about the nature of the project that was funded. And it also links back and creates cross-publicity opportunities for these projects and opportunities. So we are amidst quite a significant website redesign, but it is launched, and I'll happily send out that link. A lot of questions we get is, can we see other people's applications? Which we say no, because they can often get quite personal. But we do have this amazing archive. Our projects manager, Jared Reed, has been working day and night for the past 4 months in creating this, and it will be ongoing. We're now up to date through the end of 2024, and so this will be a perpetual living archive. I know Tommy touched a lot on the funding programs, but just as a quick overview of the Durango Creates program, we implement that largely, and then we coordinate the review committee and follow the exact same processes that the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Fund. We're trying to be totally on the same page in terms of clarity and transparency in how all these programs are implemented. And you will be, as you noted, you already saw the list of projects on the consent agenda for tonight. But for just to show a little bit of the appetite, we didn't have as large of a pool to pull from this year. So we didn't push it as hard as we did last year. Last year, I think we had almost $1 million in requests for only 40,000 distributors, something like that. Don't quote me on those numbers. But this year we did, for round one, receive 13 applications requesting close to $50,000 in funding, and our review committee did the tough job of narrowing those down to just 7 applications to put forward. Public art calls, another big part of our scope of work with the city is working with various departments on putting out public art calls. I do have a list here. Earlier in the year, we worked with the La Plata County Airport to put some of the images, some of the pieces here that were awarded funding. They are slated to launch late May, late spring and early summer, but we've got some huge panels going up at the airport. We've got a beautiful interactive sculpture by Jeff Wise, and he's creating it in concert with a lot of Ignacio High School students. And we also have Annie Bustle's a big mural going up, and we're going to be working on another call for phase 2 of the airport redevelopment, which will be coming up within the next few months. I had a great meeting with Dylan today from Transportation. We're also about to launch another one to paint some of the, it's not a bump out, it had a funny name, but some of the curb extensions that are on the road for the summer. So that's going to be released soon. And we're also working with the Parks and Rec Department to put together a call to repurpose some pieces from the historic rope tow that at Chapman Hill, and we'll be launching a call for that relatively soon as well. in terms of public engagement, Kip was at a few of our events. I think we had at least 6 official. It's a little tricky because I'm trying to report just on first quarter, but we've been ongoing since. But we've been doing a lot of public engagement sessions, and we're about to launch another one. May 20th is our date. We're still landing on the time related to the public art master plan, to have a lot of people come in and take a look at what we're working with and develop our game plan for redesigning that. And we also are in charge of First Fridays now. We started this a few years ago in conjunction with Local First and also the Smiley Art Room Collective, but we've just taken over full ownership of that program, and we're amidst a rebranding and to relaunch that program really heavily. It's ongoing, but to really come out hot and heavy in the summer. I was just talking to Tim from the bid, and we're really excited. We've got a lot of good things programmed and coming up for the summer. Also, the Creative District is just about to relocate our offices to take over a gallery space that's currently owned by 11th Street. So they've offered us a pretty phenomenal deal. So we're very excited to be in the heart of what First Fridays is, and to have much more of a public forward face, so we can be a physical hub for the community rather than just a conceptual one. So we're going to be holding our meetings and a lot of training sessions. We're going to develop a 101 series, which will do or have all sorts of like informational sessions, like how to pay murals 101, how do you price it, what's your insurance, all the itty gritty sort of details that come with a lot of questions that we've observed through all this lodgers tax consulting. On that note, with the Q2 priorities, we are heavily looking into the public art master plan. We've already had a few preliminary meetings. Our existing public art master plan is from 2015, only lists sculpture. I know that we've put, I'm pretty sure, at least 30 pieces of public art since I started a few years ago. It's very out of date. So we're really excited to use this as an opportunity to get a lot of community involvement. We're going to do a lot of recon in figuring out the exact data location points, to update a map of where different pieces are in different parts of the city. And we're also, we intend to update it with available locations, which is a question that we get all the time. And often we're like, talk to a business owner, you know, forge that relationship yourself. But we're going to be doing that legwork of identifying locations and that initial discussion with business owners, so we can mitigate some of the legwork that a lot of our applicants are intimidated by for those first steps of trying to implement creative programming. Let's see. Yeah, so we're hoping that we will create a living public art master plan, not just a sort of a stagnant PDF. So something that can be updated and released with a lot of these funding platforms. So it's an information source that can be updated and also accessed digitally. Another big project that we've identified is updating historic signage. The timing is really beautiful because 2026 is the 150-250 celebration. So we're currently at a time where there's some more grants than usual towards things like historic signage. A little more detail, as Kip was noting, right now, all that Durango has largely, or the main historic signage, is the Moments Project, which is over 20 years old. It's a beautiful project, but it only has images from 1890 to 1920, which is a very colonialist perspective in terms of what type of information we're sharing. So we've pulled together a group of people to do preliminary assessment in how we can improve this. So we've worked with several local historians, La Plata Historic Society. I've had conversations with the city's DEIB committee and Visit Durango about this project. So we're forming a more robust proposal, and we'll be seeking funding to hopefully implement a much larger scale project in 2026. Included in that, the Moments Project is a specific piece of public art in the city's collection. So included in that would be rehabbing that, hopefully including QR codes, translating it, updating the ADA accessibility, so also having audio components. So we've been working really closely with a bunch of different folks in various city departments, and also just like really lovely local historians and identifying ideal locations for that. Any questions about that specifically?
It's very much an early work in
Amazing. I'm
progress.
so excited.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Excited about that.
We're excited because it's time to have them translated. It's time to have audio. We can really examine ways we've been working with Visit Durango in terms of avoiding congestion, in terms of signage. So we're trying to be really thoughtful on how to, best implement this program for everybody.
There's an element, Catherine, that I've always wanted to do too, is talk about the trail names that we've got. Where did those come from? What's the history behind those? The bridges all have some kind of historical placards on them, and so again, audio components that could apply. Maybe the Moments Project is the pilot test on this or whatever, but I think there's other historical signage that's in place that's probably done. I mean, not going to change a whole lot, but how do we evolve some of that signage into along these same lines? So
yeah, we've also been talking to Visit Durango about coordinating various walking tours. Like also we have so much more public art now, which needs some reference. Like we've got an Olga Little mural with no historic context. So a lot of the locals may understand what that is. But we are a historic downtown, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to lean into that for multiple departments.
All right, Catherine, I have one question. Okay, so your Moments Project. Okay, so I understand you're updating it for the 150, 250 celebration.
Yeah, that's just sort of a convenient timing. The 150 celebration is 2026. I originally approached Sean Wells, who is the one who developed the Moments Project, last year because there are a few really amazing local historians who are trying to tell marginalized and untold stories. And we were talking about how to make that project more equitable. And that initial conversation led to this larger exploration into developing historic signage that wouldn't necessarily be wed to the Moments Project format, which is based on photographs in front of exact places, but much more historical context. We also are reaching out to Southern Ute historians to include some more authentic content. And it's just convenient that the 250, 150 celebration is so geared towards Colorado specific history. So it's a ripe
it was excellent planning, Catherine.
Yes,
excellent
it was
planning.
intended from the beginning. And then just one other quick note about the CCI conference. It's an amazing opportunity to develop regional networking relationships. We left so excited that we are going to hold a Western Slope Colorado or Creative District convening in October. So we've decided to go rogue and hold a mid-year convening, and that will take place in Ridgeway this year. So it will be Durango, Ignacio, Ridgeway, Telluride, and Grand Junction. And we're also inviting Silverton, which is in the process of applying to be a creative district. But we're really interested in exploring regional collaborations. How can we send our artists there? None of our communities are large enough for artists to pay their mortgage based on local sales alone. And we're trying to really create a strong cohort. And Josh, the head of CCI, will also be joining us. And there's a lot of city councilors and mayors who attend these. So we're hoping that it will be convenient for all of you. As soon as we set the date, we will let you know to really see the broader community impact that this work implies. Yeah, that's it. Any questions?
No questions. Well, I did maybe have one and then more of a comment. So earlier when you were talking about the applications and then money requests had gone down this year, other than anecdotal, do you have any data to understand why there were less applicants or maybe less money requested for the
Durango Creates?
Correct.
We purposely, last year, we had a larger pool of funding that came from community development. And our goal was to get every dollar out the door and publicize the heck out of this thing. And it worked. But this year, because we had a much smaller source of funding, this year it's coming out of lodger's tax. So I think we have 40,000 distribute, whereas last year we had 85. So we intentionally did not spread the word quite as much as we had before, just because of capacity in terms of the funding.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The only other comment I have is one of the last CEC meetings that we had before we became the DCD. We talked about a living, breathing, like master art plan and how important that was to everybody, but also to have a document, where is the art and having that, more interactive, like how do we get that going? So I love And I know there's a long way to get to those points, but man, I love the fact that we're putting steps in place to really realize some of those ambitions and objectives, to really discuss like how creative and how amazing our creatives are in our community, and how do we showcase that and really celebrate that. So I'm really glad those conversations are still being had. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all part of this historic signage project, is also that idea of creating, putting more emphasis on not only our location as a place and the culture that's here, but or that has historically been here and created it, but where we are now. So we're hoping to implement multiple tiers of those tours and increase QR codes and just, spread the love as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine, one more question. Do you have any perspective on that? Tommy had illustrated that there was about 25,000 that was put in for maintenance of current artwork that's in the city. Do you have any perspective on if that's a great amount? Is that a tenth of the amount? Is that anything that's just an opinion on?
I think that we will be able to answer that in much more detail after we do the recon for this public art master plan, because we're going to be going to every spot. We're going to have very fresh eyes on what's that signage like. Does it need more? We'll be able to have a comprehensive list of where recommendations are, like, oh, this is actually chipping. Another thing that we've talked about is, as murals are funded, to request a list of the paint that was included. So that way, if we are ever in a position where we need to upgrade or fix chips or graffiti, we'll have an archive of what colors are included, and just get ahead of, be a little more proactive about maintenance.
Great, thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
My apologies, Mayor and Council. I don't think I did well with presenting or putting enough time with all the presentations we have. We do have another big one coming up, which is the police department on speed enforcement camera update. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Public Works, apologize if we can just push theirs to the next month to give the PD enough time and to answer your questions. And if we do have enough time, they can come back, but just want to ensure that discussion is ability to go on and answer all the questions that you have. So we'll leave it for PD to do. And if there is time left, we can do Public Works, but if not, that's okay. We don't feel like we have to rush to get to that side.
Good afternoon, Mayor Yazzie, Mayor Pro Tem Woodruff, and City Council. My name is Keegan Dull. Obviously, I'm a police officer with the Durango Police Department.
I'm Jacob Dunlop. I'm a commander of the police department.
As you can see, this is a presentation regarding the use of automated speed cameras. So first, I want to approach the subject of speed safety and why it matters. Everyone who lives, works, and plays and visits the city of Durango deserves to be safe. Careless and speeding drivers are an instant wedge to that safety. I mean, how often do we see someone on their phone as we wait patiently at a crosswalk? I know I've seen that when I've been in full uniform. Speeding endangers lives, and fatalities or serious injuries are more than numbers. Each person injured due to speeding is a preventable statistic: a mother, a child, a grandmother, a brother. Each injury that happens in the city of Durango is a valued community member or a visitor. By worrying about speed safety, we at the police department hope to reduce accidents, keep lives safer, and be diligent in our responses to complaints that come in to the PD on a daily basis. Our biggest goal is to create a deterrent to speed so we can cite ultimately the least amount of speeding citations, because no one speeds in Durango. Automated speed cameras are a direct way to stay true to our mission and vision. By focusing on speed, changing behaviors, and becoming a city where everyone knows that speeding is taken seriously, we create a safer environment to live, work, and play. And that's for both our citizens and our visitors. Speed cameras can be moved around, meaning we can use information and data to understand speed trends and slow drivers down. At the end of the day, speed cameras are one more resource the police department can utilize to provide proactive policing to our community. As we can see here, speeding is detrimental to our roads. Nationally, between 2022 and 2023, there were over 5.9 million crashes each year, with over 40,000 fatalities each year. Speeding causes over 11,700 fatalities each year in the United States. In Colorado alone, over 24,800 crashes happen each year where loved ones and family members are injured. In Durango, we have hundreds of crashes each year. This includes yearly between 38 and 43 crashes that caused injury to Durangans over the past few years. One injury is too much. Each week, the police department receives numerous complaints regarding speed, whether community members are reporting to our dispatch, whether they're emailing or calling the police department, or whether they're waving down officers who are on other calls to talk about speeding issues. Citizens of Durango have an issue with speeders. I frankly agree with our community because speeding can quickly become an incredibly dangerous endeavor. Many studies show similar data like this, and it's a basic piece of knowledge that I think we all know. When an individual drives faster, it takes longer to stop. The average vehicle traveling 20 miles per hour will take approximately 40 feet to stop. At 40 miles an hour, that distance goes up to approximately 118 feet to stop. This also assumes that the driver's paying attention, isn't scrolling Instagram on their phone, and they're keeping their vehicle maintained, not to mention rain or snow. An extra 78 feet to stop could easily mean the pedestrian or cyclist crossing the road ends up in the hospital. We have seen multiple times, even at slow speeds, where vehicles lock up their tires trying to stop for a pedestrian or bicyclist. And speaking of our pedestrians, I think this graph becomes all the more telling, to me at least, on how destructive speed is. At 20 miles per hour, a driver is unlikely to cause death if a pedestrian is hit, but is approximately 20% likely to cause serious injury and 50% likely to cause moderate injury. At 40 miles an hour, a driver is 30 to 40% likely to cause a fatality and up to 95% likely to cause moderate or serious injury to someone walking across the street. Speed kills and injures, and the police department wants the community to be safe. We can obviously see how speed can be incredibly problematic, so why have speed cameras? Well, one speed camera can work 24/7 without needing a bathroom break, without needing to break for lunch. A camera won't need to stop traffic enforcement to go on to other calls for service. This is a great supplement to the traffic enforcement that will continue to happen with our officers. Speed cameras are proven by the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration and CDOT to be an effective speed reduction tactic. These work to slow down drivers. Compared to hiring officers, this is an incredibly low-cost option, and at the end of the day, our goal is to slow down drivers and create a behavioral change so everyone from community members to visitors knows that you don't speed in Durango. While it is a proven method to reduce speed, there are certain risks for speed cameras. From some of the feedback we have received from social media, including non-residents of Durango, there are a lot of questions surrounding the use of speed cameras. This creates a need for communication, and we as the police department are prepared and willing to answer these questions and be transparent. While the process would likely start generating revenue, most cities see the revenue decreases, but we see this as a positive because at the end of the day, our roads are safer and we're not giving out those citations. People are slowing down. There will be growing pains while we test this process, and we'll be flexible on our end to make sure to test this process to make sure we get the best results with the best impact for safety for our community. The process for implementing speed cameras is based off of state statute. The statute was updated in 2023 by a legislative update specifically to amend the current law to fit with national standards that have been upheld by the courts. Municipal ordinance is required to follow the state statute, which reduces the liability for Durango. There are a multitude of requirements in the statute to protect the citizens. We have options to buy or lease equipment from vendors. We're buying it has a larger upfront cost, but the leasing has a continual monthly ongoing cost. There will also be associated administrative costs from that company to invoice for the processing of these citations. With either option, this program should be self-funded with the possibility to create some of the revenue. We have already budgeted in the police department in our 2025 budget to start this program for the safety of the community. It'll be a civil citation, much like a parking ticket or a tollway infraction, and will not be criminal in nature or have points assessed to a license.
So really, we're exploring this because we've heard from our community members that they would like us to provide speed enforcement cameras for 24/7 coverage. As Officer Dole mentioned, we get 2 to 3 calls a week through our patrol calls for service of residents in neighborhoods asking for speed enforcement in that area. And this will provide us another tool to address that. Additionally, we've had a lot of meetings with communities, 3rd Avenue, North College, Animas View Drive, Crestview. We've had a lot of meetings, and a common theme in that is traffic safety and speed enforcement in their neighborhoods. And pretty much universally, those communities support the idea of a speed enforcement camera in their neighborhoods to help with that. And then we also have an Engage page where we open up the conversation electronically, seeking input about where people feel that a speed camera would be, where a good place would be for a speed camera in the community, as well as an open conversation with comments that many of the city members responded to and kind of collaborated with to provide a message with that. I'd like to point out on that, we had 95 contributions on the map of where people felt that a speed enforcement camera would be an effective tool. And in the comments section, the comments supporting the idea outweighed the comments opposing the idea by almost 2 to 1, 58%, 55% to 31% of the comments. So we're seeing that support even online with it. So with that, questions?
I mean, are you going to present more, or is that okay?
This is an introduction to it, and we wanted to get a sense. This is the first time we brought it up to council.
Sure.
So we want to see what questions you have, and then we can go from there.
Officer, you had mentioned that there would potentially be a labor savings with the implementation of the cameras or the acquisition of cameras. Have you guys been able to quantify what that could potentially mean in cost savings for the city for the implementation of cameras?
So one camera will cost roughly, it depends on which vendor we're using, but will cost roughly $20,000 to $25,000 for one camera. That's that upfront cost. It'll work 24/7. It's built in for the state statute that out of the citation, there will be services rendered that we can pay the vendors. So with that, it just, at the end of the day, it depends on how much, again, hopefully not much revenue that we get because people are slowing down and we're not having that speeding issue. But $25,000 is less than the take home salary for one officer, not to mention all the benefits and such associated with that person.
We anticipate that the cameras could potentially be self-sustaining just off of the citation fees. Again, state statute regulates the fees imposed on this to $40. Unless it's in a construction or school zone, then it's $80. But there are going to be some costs associated with it. The benefits of buying the cameras up front are that we have a little more control over where we want to place them, as opposed to if we're just doing a straight up kind of lease type option where the vendor may have a little bit more concerns about where we're placing them in the communities. So, but we do anticipate either direction for it to be a self-sustaining program.
Sure, but there'll also be some realized gains by not having to position an officer at that station, even for 2 or 3 hours, to try to minimize how much speeding occurs, right? So, there's probably some gains there. And then, do you anticipate having those enforcement officers in other regions trying to continue to combat in other areas that there aren't cameras, or would they be potentially, those assets would be utilized elsewhere for other tasks?
This is a tool in our toolbox. We're not going to change our traffic enforcement strategies overall. it's just another way that we can provide a service that's at 24/7 type of thing. And we may still have traffic enforcement around these areas because one of the concerns we've had is, well, once people know exactly where the camera is, they'll slow down for that neighborhood, but then speed elsewhere. And it's like, well, good, okay, we've got speeding down in that neighborhood, and we can still have traffic enforcement, you know, as people are coming out of it and everything else, and address those driving behaviors.
Excellent. Thank you.
Will you guys have a phased approach for this? I'm assuming you're not going to put one on every street corner. So how many do we have coming first? 5, 4, 3?
So we want to start basically with one camera. It'll be a rollout where we use some of our data that we gather where speeding occurs, what neighborhoods are requesting it, so we can see before and after we implement this, is there a reduction in speed? Is it working? How can we do that? So we want to use that data-driven approach to figure out what's going on. Before that too, per the state statute, before we even put one camera out, there will be a 30-day notification period on the website, bless you, saying, hey, yes, these cameras are coming. The first 30 days that they're up, there will be a warning period where it's warnings only. There's signage before the cameras go up, so it's very clear. That's some of the protections that the citizens have.
Who gets the notifications? Residents nearby or the whole screen?
So the notification that it's going up will be basically a social media website city blast saying, yes, we're implementing this. And then the citations or the written warnings for that first 30-day period will go right to the registered owner.
Can you move the cameras once you install them in one spot? Can you like cycle them around, or is it just one and done there?
Absolutely. So these cameras, the ones that we're looking at, will have solar and battery power. So once we have them in a spot, we want to, make sure that spot works. We slow down the individuals. It's there for a long enough time to make a difference, but we can then move them around where we see hot spots.
Will you be doing, I know Animas View Drive, we've gotten a ton of emails from that neighborhood, so obviously they're in, and you said there was a few other neighborhoods. Will you be doing community engagement before you install them in areas to be like, do neighborhoods want this? I mean, most neighborhoods do because they want people to.
Yeah, and that's some of the data that we've gotten in from different people, different neighborhoods. Animas View Drive has been very vocal about wanting people to slow down on that road, calling into the police department for complaints coming in. So that is one of the spots that we're definitely looking at, and we do want. That's part of the reason why we wanted a study session, so it can be kind of an open forum. We want to work with the community. We don't want this to be a surprise. We want to be transparent so people know what's going on.
And then my last question, will you be using like data sets to decide where we put this for the most bang for our buck? Like how many cars come through this intersection? How many speeding tickets have been issued here in the last, is it a high speeding, does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's as we've built up to this point, we've already done a lot, and of course we'll need to update them, but we do have data trackers right now that are not cameras. They're just a sensor that senses speed of vehicles through the neighborhoods. And so we'll run week-long speed studies throughout different neighborhoods and kind of look for that. We already do that when we get somebody, if a citizen is complaining about excessive speeds in their neighborhood, we'll go install one of these data collectors just to kind of get some trending information that we can work with the engineering department in other areas. And yes, we'll continue to use those studies.
I just get concerned because sometimes like maybe the neighbors on Second are very vocal, but there's not a lot of traffic nor accidents there. But at this intersection where there's not neighbors, maybe it's more of a,
Some of the dynamics that we're going to be considering is with just safety like that.
Yeah.
Children's safety, parks and stuff like that, downtown safety. That's going to be some of the driving factor. And yeah, we're going to do this studies with it, but we're going to be more inclined to focus on maybe the school zone areas and where there's a lot of foot traffic and stuff like that, as opposed to like South Camino del Rio and Bodo Park, where it's not as much of a complaint issue.
Cool. Thank you.
Alrighty.
I know you guys are a little short on time, but I do have Maya Graber from my office here because there is a city attorney's office legal component to this that if you decide to go forward, it's something I have to brief you on. I mean, we need to have a judge in place for appeals. We need to have someone there as a prosecution side to prosecute it all. So there's enough, if you decide to go forward with any type of program, just want you to be aware that that's I'm gonna say burden, but it's an additional task for my office to deal with.
Are we making the decision today? I didn't see it on the agenda. Oh, okay. I was like, wait. So
No,
before
I
that
think he said
happens-
this is just initial, introduce
Yes.
what they're thinking about doing. There'd be
Okay.
several more meetings, but that's a part of the bigger picture is that it does involve anytime you're giving someone a civil citation or a traffic ticket, that does then touch your municipal court or a process set up specifically for these type of citations.
I'd like to comment on that, Mark. With that is, we've been a slow buildup with this. The Colorado legislators updated the law in 2023, but it was so different than what other states have done that there was kind of a slow rollout as communities and vendors figured out how to accommodate portions of the law that came out. And some of that includes the dispute process, review process, and everything else. And so, yeah, we've been looking at some of the impacts and some of the options with that as we go.
Alrighty, noted. We'll have to investigate that
So,
at another meeting.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Yeah, I do have more questions, but I can take them off on the side.
Go ahead. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, so I have concerns around the data. So I'm not sure how the data is collected, stored, how long it's held. Is it the exact same as me getting a citation on the side of the road and it's treated the exact same way?
So in the state statute update, there's a lot of protections. Some of that is the data. The data that we get for the speed traffic enforcement via that camera is only to be used for the speed traffic enforcement via the civil citation. It can't be stored elsewhere. It can't be used for other things. It is stored on a specific server. Usually the vendors have the encryption on their servers. So there's a lot of protections about that. Within 3 years after the last action on whatever happened with that citation, that data has to be purged. So it's not something that'll be stored long term, and it's only stored for the purposes of the dispute process. Something that we can look at on that data is, okay, this vehicle has sped past this camera 10 times. Maybe instead, let's go pay him a visit and say, hey, what's going on? Let's have a conversation. Can you please slow down? We want to make sure you're safe and the residents are safe. So that data is totally separate, has to be purged within 3 years, and that's not used for anything else.
And the vendors have no ability to sell data in any way, shape, or form.
Correct.
Collected through this process. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's red light enforcement too, but we haven't gotten into that yet.
Okay.
We're just looking at the speed. I would like to, on our Engage page, there were concerns about just bulk, like tracking every car that comes through. These speed cameras are not triggered until they get a sensor from the LiDAR or the radar unit that doesn't record the types of vehicles. It just senses that vehicle's going above the speed limit threshold. That's when it activates the camera, takes the pictures, and then those pictures are coupled with that and then go through an approval process where most vendors have somebody that review it in-house before they send it to the government agency to review it a second time, agree with it, approve a citation being issued or a warning. And then so there's a multi-layered process, but yeah, the cameras don't even trigger unless somebody's already speeding in front of it.
And we issue the citation or the vendor issues the citation?
The vendor, once we approve it, most of the contracts we have, a vendor will mail out the citation, just because depending on how many we get, that's more FTEs for the city and everything else. And
From the city, but it's processed and mailed out.
yeah,
We're paying for that service. Out
yeah,
of
we'll
probably the
set up
revenue.
what the citation is going to look like, what information it conveys, make sure it complies with what our values and morals are for our community. But it will be the vendor that actually packages and mails it out.
Yeah, finally, and just to double down on what Jessica had said, I think there's got to be a tipping point where you have to have X number of cameras for it to be an effective, decrease overall in speed and not just people moving around to avoid the cameras. And so would love to hear a little bit more about that whenever we, next talk about this as well.
I mean, we can talk a little bit. We haven't settled on anything specifically yet, but we are looking at Junction Street as you're coming into the 15th Street interchange there as an area. We're looking at College. Some of the issues with where we're looking at is that streets and engineering are doing a lot of projects right now. So we don't want to put our test camera up in an area that's getting worked on, and that's going to skew any of the enforcement type stuff anyway. Junction Street's another place that we've got a lot of input from the community, but Junction Street, I believe, is about to undergo a lot of safe routes to schools type stuff. So that'll probably be later on the list once that stuff's done. And
It'd be interesting to see school data too. I mean, if the camera was initially put there, I think the community would respond positively if we saw that there was a lot of speeding and some changes that were initiated around schools. So thanks, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a couple follow-up if you don't mind, Mayor. Thank you. How are the cameras transmitting information? Is it a hardwire that is going to a cloud that then we have access to and the vendor has access to, or is that a wireless transmission? How is that being transmitted?
So most of them have a basically a hotspot in there that can go to the vendor's website, the cloud in there, the secure storage. A lot of these vendors have a software on the back end that pretty quickly, usually it's either on the hour or at midnight type of thing, all that data gets moved up to that software, that secure network, and then we can access that and see, hey, this is the data that we gather. So each camera would have a hotspot type network attached to it.
Gotcha.
Part of our vendor requirements for this is that they are going to have to meet all of the existing requirements for what's called CJIS or NCIC, which is our access into the crime information sharing networks that the state and federal governments all belong to. And they've got security requirements that our vendors are going to have to meet for data security on this. And again, it's our data from the moment the camera takes the picture. Yes, it is being funneled through a vendor's website for processing, but it's all segregated into the city of Durango's data. And we're the only ones that can access and manage it, aside from the vendor doing their work as well.
I guess that was my next question, is like what sort of protocols and safety, and security measures are there on that to make sure that the information is safeguarded appropriately? And I'm glad that there's a caliber there. And then correct me, also, Clancy, do we have a speech management plan kickoff on May 27th? Is that part of this conversation or no? Trying to get like more community input around this. And if they're going to be presenting on that, then would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, so the speed management plan is separate from this. However, this can be a tool as part of that speed management plan. So the preliminary survey, the draft of the survey that I've seen, we did incorporate a question as well of, do you support the use of automated speed enforcement cameras? So that's I believe a yes or no. It could be, I can't remember how it ended up, or a scaling, strongly agree, disagree, but there is a question on there related to this.
Great. Obviously you all will be there, so it'd be good to be.
Yeah, we've worked with Devin King quite a bit on multimodal speed management stuff. We've been there for the grant selection and everything else. So yeah, this is a tool, just like for his objectives are for creating safer streets. It's just an option along with engineering and some of the other stuff. We just happen to both independently be working on this, and then we came together as the speed management project started spooling up.
Great. Last one I have, I'm sure it'll depend on the vendor, but is there like a range of is it a flat rate that we would have an ongoing monthly or yearly installment for, or is that more of like a rotating depending upon usage? Or
so it's probably going to, one of the challenging parts, but I understand why the legislatures built it into the protections, is that municipalities, governments cannot charge a per citation fee, or the vendors cannot be compensated at a per citation fee. So what most of the vendors are looking to do now is to batch them. And that's going to depend on the contracts that we set up in our RFP for choosing a vendor, is just understanding what our costs are going to be. And yeah, we'll probably end up having to batch them, batches of, well, it depends on how many we have, but we'll go from there on it.
Okay, great.
So just, this does require an ordinance be adopted at the local level. So just for, I don't want to say next steps, but you've gotten some information. It sounds like you're going to get some more information. To go forward with anything, you would have to hit your agenda as an ordinance. Where that comes from one of you guys under new business or it comes from administration, we've made no commitment to that yet, but you are multiple meetings away. And it can be a controversial subject, the implementation, the scale. And we didn't want you to get blindsided by that, which is why we had this presentation for you guys at this meeting. But again, from the legal end, it's going to require an ordinance which takes 3 meetings.
Just to clarify, we're not looking for a new agenda item from the council on this one yet. I think it was a first time to present to you, see what the questions are. I'd imagine we probably would have one final study session that would come back again of just kind of here's a more formalized plan before going through an ordinance. But they just allowed us to get that first time into that communication and your questions.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. The last one. I know. I feel like Kip. From shot across the bow. From the moment that we approve an ordinance, you know, what is the turnaround time in getting something
Great
up and
question.
running?
Thank you. I was going to sneak that in at the end, but it's probably, so once the ordinance is approved, we don't even want to put out an RFP until the ordinance has been approved. Because if we don't have the mechanism, it's not worth it. That's a 4 to 6 months to get that first test camera out into the community operating. So there is a little bit of lag with it. We do the other 2 comments I'd like to kind of make in addition. We, in our budget right now that we got approved for, just in anticipation for hoping this developed a little bit quicker, we've got money for probably at least 3 cameras to buy. But again, that's not something that we're not wanting to rush into this. We're wanting to phase into it and get it right the first time. So there's that. And then we will be looking to get input from the communities where we're looking to put the cameras, and we'll do some of the traffic studies leading up to the cameras. Once the cameras are put in, then we'll be doing the obligatory 30-day warning period, stuff like that as we go with it, and then track compliance on the back end and really understand the effects that they're having in the communities.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. It seems like you're just at the beginning of this process. But I'd like to put a plug in for Eminence View Drive because I went to that community meeting, last fall or maybe the fall before, and they wanted cameras then because they have a significant speeding issue on their street. But thank you.
And hear it, and we can work with some other enforcement tools leading up to it. Unfortunately, this is a complicated process with the city attorney's office, with council deciding how they want to support some of that, and then going through the purchasing process and then implementation and getting them installed and all that stuff.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned. That's all we have. And I'm sure dinner is here.